Hi, this is Paisley here,
And this is Dr. Crow.
and today we are playing as,
Babyl-one.
but it is a one city challenge. So first let's get into the game before we get into a little bit about the history of Babyl-one. This is a wetlands map on deity difficulty, and because it's on deity difficulty, I tried to make it a little bit easier for myself by handpicking the city-states and playing with secret societies, heroes, and barbarian modes on. So here is our opening start, and I think the move is to move onto the Plains Hill tile so we can preserve the forest chop, move closer to the faith from the incense, and as Babyl-one, you want to be close to floodplains.
And of course, this relates to the geography of Mesopotamia, which is really, in a lot of cases, a floodplain. It's a very flat environment, and it is bounded by the two great rivers, the Euphrates and the Tigris.
But here we are on Karun River and the Euphrates.
Okay, so we still have two rivers at least.
Yeah, so it's like a little bit correct, but what is the Karun River?
Karun River is on the other side. It is not in Iraq, it's in Iran, but it is in the same general region, but it is not quite the same.
And I think the wonder I must get is Edamananki, not just because it's so OP, but also it relates to the Babylonian civilization.
It's very topical. It is the origin of the myth of the Tower of Babel, but it was actually a temple to the god Marduk, and Marduk was the city god of Babylonia.
And here we meet Geneva, our first city-state, but it was not a first meet, which means someone is close by. Now, if you don't know about Babylon's abilities, when you get a Eureka, you just get the tech. So if I meet another Civ, I just get the tech for Edamananki. So that's the plan here. And that's why I thought in terms of a one city challenge, maybe Babyl-one is a good choice. I mean, we'll see here.
Well, I think it is. Historically, Babylon was a city-state for most of its history. It has two great periods of empire, the Old Babylonian Empire with Hammurabi as the main king, and the Neo-Babylonian Empire with Nebuchadnezzar II as the main king. But these are separated by 1,000 years.
Yes, and here we have Hammurabi as our leader. The first governor I'm going for is Magnus because I need to chop out Edamananki. This is a wetlands map. It's gonna go fast, and I'm just not gonna play if I don't get it. So that's the goal here.
So the name Babylon comes from either ancient Akkadian, which was the main language of that area, or ancient Sumerian. And Sumerian was a little bit south in the marshes of southern Iraq. It is believed to may have come from the word Ba-Allah, right? Which is the Akkadian for Gate of the Gods. And actually it's pretty similar to the Arabic today. But it also may have been originally a Sumerian word, which we don't know the meaning of.
And speaking of Akkadian, we do have a city-state in Civ 6 called Akkad. Now, what is the relationship between Akkad and Babyl-one?
So Akkad is the name for the more northern area of Mesopotamia. In modern day Iraq, you would probably call this the middle of Mesopotamia, but at that time it was the north part. Akkad was the first great empire of the north. It conquered Sumeria, or Sumer, we should say. Sumeria is not a real term. Yes.
Interesting.
Yes.
My eyebrows went up. You guys can't see it, but my eyebrows just shot up.
But the Akkadians had a Semitic language, like modern day Arabic or Hebrew, whereas Sumerian, the language, was a totally isolated language, but we don't really know where it came from.
Oh, and we just met Hungary here. So I made a huge mistake because I was just playing around and trying to figure out if I could get this game going. And I just put random civs in the game. Now, Hungary, of course, is not historically an accurate neighbor for Babyl-one. So I think, you'll see the civs are just going to be totally random. They kind of help me out because they're not particularly strong civs, I think, in terms of science. But who should I have really put in here?
Definitely Sumer should be in there. Egypt, for sure.
Which
Persia.
Egypt?
Well, I would say the Pharaonic Egypt. Definitely Ramses would be more suitable.
Right, because Ptolemaic Egypt is much later.
Yes, by that time, Babylon is really on its way out.
And when the game talks about an ancient period and a classical period, it's important to note that Egypt spans both.
Yes, definitely. Babylon technically does span both. Alexander dies in Babylon, very famously, but it is really at that point declining in power. The Seleucid Empire, which follows it, builds a new Greek-style capital, and after that, Babylon really declines.
And you may have heard the word Seleucid in our last video on Pamukkale, right?
Yeah, that's right. A lot of different pronunciations. I tried to give it the ancient Greek pronunciation here, but
I'm pretty sure it's Seleucid, but it's, I guess not. You're the historian. You're the ancient historian of this family.
I am not an ancient historian. I just took one class on Mesopotamian ceramics during my undergrad. But that class was 3 hours long, so
Every week.
So I did learn a lot.
Right. So let's talk about why we know anything about Babylon. It's because our undergrad degrees were in Near and Middle East studies. Now, these are undergrad degrees. That an undergrad degree, I'm sorry to say, does not make you an expert in a topic.
Absolutely not.
So we're going to get some things wrong, and feel free to post in the comments what you know, what your expertise is in, and what we got wrong. But we tried to do our research.
We tried to do our best, yeah.
So can you tell us what is the Near East, and why did our department call it Near and Middle East?
Well, Near East usually comes from archaeology. It's not really a term that is used when talking about the modern Middle East, but it is a term that refers to the area that's called the Fertile Crescent historically, this kind of range that goes from Mesopotamia to northern Syria into the Levant.
Right, and here we get our pantheon. Now, we get it so early that I just really wanted religious settlements, but that's not the point of the game. So I'm just gonna grab a builder. I'm not really sure what other choice I had in this game because I'm only going for a few wonders, so the production to wonders didn't make sense. My tiles are not that breathtaking, so the breathtaking one did not make sense. So we get a free builder, which hopefully will help us get Edamananki sooner. And you see here on the screen, I'm planning out which wonders I do want, and none of them are really ancient wonders anymore. I'm thinking Kilwa would be good for a one city challenge, maybe Forbidden City for the extra card. And I'm planning a lot of districts because my plan is to grow really fast. And so the more you grow, the more district slots you have.
Nice.
Going back to this idea of the Near East, it contrasts with the Far East. These are obviously Orientalist terms, but they're not really useful terms because it puts the center of Earth in Europe. And so the Near East is the part closest to Europe, nearest to Europe, and Far East is the part furthest from Europe.
One of the interesting things about Mesopotamian archaeology is that because the land is so flat, essentially anytime you see a hill in Mesopotamia, you can kind of assume that there was an ancient city out there.
That's so interesting.
Yeah. So these ancient hills called tells became the main sources for archaeology of the 19th century because they were so obvious. You could just see a hill, dig, and find the city. Babylon was never really lost, but it was only excavated in the 19th and 20th centuries.
Okay, so I'm clearing out the barbs here. Now I'm thinking I can kill 3 barbs and get the boost to ironworking. That way I can start chopping out jungle tiles, which would be very useful. And as you see here, just getting the irrigation boost gets us irrigation. But before I get dyes online, I'm just gonna keep chopping out the Edamananki. And as you see, we meet a few more neighbors here. We've got Pachacuti and the Gull, which, I mean, usually you don't want the Gull in your game, but you don't want Babylon in your game for the same reason, which is they speed up barbarian tech really fast, but that's going to be what I do this game.
Yeah, it's sort of interesting. I think in all of the Civ games, and Babylon has been in all of the Civ games, it's been a science Civ, and I think that's pretty interesting.
Why do you think that is?
Well, a lot of our scientific, mathematical, astronomical, and medicinal knowledge really has its origins in ancient Babylon. For example, you may wonder, why are the degrees of a circle 360 degrees? Why is time in 60-degree measurements? And it's because the ancient Babylonians had a numerical system of base 60. So all that stuff comes from Babylon.
I actually never wondered that before, but it's very interesting to learn, so thank you. And I remember when I was taking my one class on ancient Mesopotamia, they had their own calendar system based on the rulers, right?
Yes, we have king lists that give us the names of the different kings of Babylon, as well as Sumer and Assyria and Acadia. So all these places have their king lists, and we have pretty good records, actually, of the history of the kings of these states.
Right. I didn't pick the wonders in the game, but I excluded some. I don't know why Galapagos is in this game, but it's a science wonder, and we found it, which will give us our astrology boost. But I don't think I'm going to go for a religion. Now, is that historically accurate for Babylon?
Well, they did have a religion, of course, and there are many gods that were shared by the different Mesopotamian peoples. Ishtar is a famous one, that's the equivalent to Venus. But Babylon has its own god, Marduk, and Edamananke is the temple to Marduk.
Excellent, great timing. So here we have Edamananke. Let's watch this. What is this called?
Video?
Let's watch this build montage. Beautiful.
Very
Now,
nice.
do we know what Edamananke looked like?
We have a pretty good idea. We know that it is a step pyramid called a ziggurat, and that was a very common Mesopotamian form. It was built mostly out of mud brick in the middle, but then had fired bricks on the side. This means it's a lot less stable than an Egyptian pyramid, which is all stone. So they had to be reconstructed pretty often. Edamananke was actually destroyed twice. Once by the Assyrians and then once by Alexander.
So did they rebuild it in between?
Yes, they rebuilt it in between. Because it's just mud brick, it's actually pretty easy to build, but it was also for that reason a little bit more fragile.
But yeah, mud brick is sort of the material of the region and the architecture is mostly mud brick based. So what we have are a lot of mounds, but not a lot of standing structures.
Yeah, that's right. Because when you have mud brick and it decays over time, it produces a mound of mud essentially. So we don't have that many stone structures that survive.
So why do you think Edamananke gives you production on your floodplain tiles in your capital and science on your marshes?
Well, I think it's designed to make these tiles really productive, to reflect just how productive these regions were in Mesopotamia, right? The marshes and the floodplains gave rise to this dense farming civilization that survives to this day. If you look at the marsh peoples of southern Iraq, they share a lot of cultural commonalities with that period.
Right, and Egypt similarly gives you production on floodplain tiles, and it's a similar reason because there's a lot of production being extracted from these marshes, these floodplains. So I decided to kill my scout basically for the boost, and thankfully the iron boost does not sort of interfere with my planning. As you saw, I planned a spaceport in a diplomatic quarter. The only thing it could have really messed up was my diplo quarter, and it didn't, thankfully. So now we have iron working. So we're moving through the tree quite fast, faster than Babylon could.
Yeah, I think this mechanic really works because it shows how Babylon had these periods of intense flourishing, but then also kind of rapid periods of collapse. So the Neo-Babylonian Empire is considered its height. During that time period, it becomes the largest city in the world, 200,000 people, which is really impressive for a pre-modern city. But it also rapidly collapses. It's defeated by the Persians, and just as we got defeated here.
Yeah, as my little poor scout dies. And so yeah, this is a really interesting thing. You really see that play out in the game. They get these boosts, their science rapidly gets through the tech tree, but you get a 50% deduction in all your science. So trying to hard tech the science technologies is really painful. So I am wondering if Babylon was a good choice for a one city challenge, but Babylon used to be just a city state in this game before they got their pack, right?
That's right. I think they wanted to include it in the game, but not make it a full civilization, maybe because it was a city state. But because it's been such a tradition in Civ, they had to bring it back.
Yeah, and I was going through the list of like other possible cities, we could have been talking about, but we missed out on because we're doing the one city challenge, and I didn't know any of them actually.
Yeah, I knew about one of them. One of them is Dur Kurigalzu, I think is the name, which has also a remnant of a ziggurat there. But yeah, I didn't really know any of them. I think most of the famous ones are in the Sumer city list, actually.
Right. And here, speaking of cities, Hungary is coming at me with a settler. Now, I'm trying to block their settler as best I can, but I only have one warrior in the area, so we'll try our best here. Now, I wasn't really planning on building the Great Bath, but as you see, it's available, and maybe that's a good enough reason to build it on this sort of floodplains here. It says the Great Bath works by giving faith on the river it's on. So I'm hovering over the rivers and trying to figure out where I have the most floodplains on, like which river. Now, this spot I picked is technically on both rivers, although the diamond is only next to Euphrates. So I'm not sure if this will only work for Euphrates or Karun River as well, but we're gonna for science it and figure it out and put it right there once I get enough money to buy the tile.
Sounds good. So the Great Bath, I think, is meant to be a Indus Valley civilization wonder, not a Babylon wonder. But the Babylonians did obviously have have a culture of bathing. One thing that's kind of interesting is in their artwork, you can tell who's Sumerian and who's Babylonian because the Sumerians fully shaved off their body hair.
Oh, I've heard about this. We talked about this when we were attempting our Egypt run.
Yeah, that's right.
And I messed up because it was all in 360 resolution. So there's like 4 lost episodes. And then I gave up on YouTube.
The secret episodes.
I was so disappointed. I'm like, forget YouTube. So that's where we've been in 8 months.
Yeah.
And Hungary has settled the city on the flood tiles that belong to my city. So we're going to have to deal with them sooner rather than later. So anyways, you were talking about shaving your entire body?
Yes, of course. My favorite topic. Yeah, so they would shave their entire body, all body hair, whereas Babylonians would keep very long beards and hair, right? So
Sumerians would shave.
Sumerians would shave.
Egyptians would shave.
They would shave, but Babylonians and Assyrians did not. So that's how we can tell in their images who's Sumerian, who's Babylonian.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember, does Gilgamesh have a beard?
He does have a beard in this, yeah.
Should he not?
I think it's fine.
Because a beard doesn't count as body hair, it's facial hair. It's a technicality.
Maybe. But of course, Gilgamesh is
not real.
A mythic figure.
Yes, he's more like the heroes.
Exactly.
Than Hammurabi.
Yes. Hammurabi is definitely a real person.
And why do we know this?
We have many, many records of his reign, including, most famously, his Code of Laws, which is on a stela, and it is a very famous document of Babylonian law that was actually preserved by another city-state that captured the stela and kept it in a museum.
Who?
I forget.
Oh. Interesting. Well, yeah, because when we did our Persia game, we talked about the first human rights.
Right.
Which, we kind of debated if that's true. Here we're talking about the first laws, Code of Laws.
It's hard to say. I mean, first laws, I'm sure there are many, many laws of societies previous to Babylon. But it is a very, very clear and explicit document of laws. So I think that's why it's so praised and so admired today.
And where is it today?
It's today in the Louvre.
Right.
Yes, I just remembered the city-state that captured it was Susa, which is in modern southern Iran. And so the French excavated Susa, they discovered the stela, and now it's in the Louvre.
Right, and the human rights Cyrus cylinder is in the British Museum, and the Code of Laws is in Paris.
Yeah.
Great. Wonderful. So even though the Great Bath is kind of like a Hail Mary move, I do see that Pachacuti is also building it. So I'm focusing in closely and trying to figure out how far are they and how far am I? Can I chop it out faster than they can build it? So I'm just trying to get these jungle chops in the corner of my empire, and hopefully it looks like I'm slightly ahead. But in my focus on the Great Bath, I totally forgot to switch off of animal husbandry, which revealed horses in my Great Library location. I switched that from Forbidden City to Great Library. I thought that might be better for Hammurabi. But yeah, horses mess up my entire plan, and I'm not gonna continue to play this game with a silly mistake like that. So we're just gonna reload, and the rules of the challenge is one city challenge. There's no rules about reloading, right?
Yeah, that's true.
I'm just trying to make sure I have fun as well. So I reload, I play out my turn, and I make sure to switch off of horseback riding. Animal husbandry. So yeah, Pachacuti's getting pretty close, but I think I'm still a little bit ahead. You can see their ceiling isn't built, but I have a part of my ceiling or roof or whatever. And so we are just 2 turns away from the Great Bath. So hopefully I get it before them, but it's not going to come before the era changes. And so we have another problem here. We definitely want a golden age.
Okay, what can we do?
I think the trick here is we only have 1 turn, but I know we can get our special unit, and that's going to be for era score.
Okay.
So I think what we need to do is sell off our Diplo favor 1 by 1, And I'm just gonna speed through this right here and buy our unit. And here it is, the Sabum, what is it called? Sabum Kibitum, giving us the 4 era score we need to enter the classical era.
Nice. And this is an Assyrian word, which means the general army. So it's a little bit of a generic term.
Yeah, and as soon as we enter the classical era with our golden age, we also get the Great Bath.
Finally, we're no longer stinking.
Yeah, great. I don't think I really needed this wonder, but we got it anyways. And as you see, it does actually work for the Karun River as well as the Euphrates, hopefully for the Euphrates. I mean, the diamond was on the Euphrates.
Right.
And for our dedication, now here's the difficult part. We're working with a 1 city challenge. Is monumentality still worth it when you're not buying settlers? And when your builders are going to be so cheap because you don't need that many, you only have 1 city. So in this case, I decided Exodus of the Evangelist would be the right choice. Try to get a religion.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, so I totally backed out this idea of no religion. Now we're trying to get a religion.
Right. So now we're moving our Sabum Kibitum towards the Hungarian city.
Yeah, they definitely need to, how do I say this politely? F off. They're very close. So we're going to declare a surprise war and just try to get the city out of our hair. I'm not sure if the Sabum Kibitum is actually that useful for war. So we're just not going to build anymore and use what we have. A couple of slingers and a couple warriors.
Yeah, I think in the game it's mostly used as a good scout, I think.
Which I did not know until like I was researching this civ.
Right.
And it's like literally in the Civlopedia, like the meta for Babylon, and it's like use this unit for scouting. Now I know, so next time I'll do that.
Yeah, next 1 city challenge.
Yeah. So why is it good for scouting? What do you think the reason is?
Well, I think it just has a high movement and it's very cheap.
It's not a spearman, right? It's a melee unit in the game. Should I double check that?
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay, yeah, so it's a unique melee unit with strength against anti-cavalry units. So it's actually the anti-spearman, right? And it has strength against cavalry units. This is kind of a weird unit, and I don't think I used it well. And it has high sight, high movement. What is its movement? 3 and it has 3 movement and a sight radius of 3. Wow. If I just read about this unit, I would have known to use it as a scout. I didn't need someone to tell me the meta. So can you tell us more about this unit historically?
Historically, within Civ, Babylon's usually had the bowman as its unique unit. But here they decided to do something a little bit more unique. This actually refers to an Assyrian term. So the Assyrians defeated Babylon, they conquered Babylon, using their general army, the Sabum Kibitum, or Sabum Kibitum.
It's a tough word.
Hard to say. But, you know, Babylonian and Assyrian are very related languages, so they probably would have used a similar word for their own army. We know a lot about the Assyrian army because they loved carving out gruesome scenes on their palace walls of battle scenes, decapitations, impalements. So the Assyrian army was not very well liked and has today, I think, even still a very fearsome reputation. Probably the Babylonians were just as fearsome in war, but they weren't so open about it, so.
Yeah, unlike in this gameplay where I had to raise the city and now everyone is starting to hate me. But I really did not have a choice, I don't think. Those were, like, you can't play a 1 city challenge and not have all your tiles. But Hungary is actually coming back with another settler, so we're not gonna make peace. We actually can't make peace. I raised it very quickly. We're just gonna watch out for more settlers, use our units on the borders.
Now hopefully Hungary doesn't raise us. Babylon was raised a couple of times. It was destroyed by the Assyrians under Sennacherib. But people really didn't like that. They thought he was cursed because of that. And actually his successors thought he was cursed too.
Because he raised Babylon?
Because he raised Babylon, he destroyed Edamananki.
Wow.
Yeah, so his successors really tried to rebuild the city to make peace with the gods.
Yeah, so we're just trying to push back this settler, and in our city, we're trying to make sure we're growing so we can hit all that pop, like max pop that we can. Now, you were saying I should have built the hanging gardens.
Yeah, I was saying, I think Hanging Gardens would be a good wonder because it was in ancient Babylon. But if we don't build it, that's okay because we're not really sure it existed.
Ah, interesting.
Yeah, it is on the list of 7 wonders, but it was not on the original list. So the
Okay.
first time the list was produced, actually had the walls of Babylon as the wonder, not the Hanging Gardens. We don't really know when Hanging Gardens got added to the list because we don't have any Babylonian records of it. We don't really have any contemporaneous depictions of it. So we think maybe they were just confused about it because there
Right.
were gardens in the Assyrian capital of Nineveh. So maybe they just got confused and put that on the list, or possibly they're referring just in general to Babylon's gardens. But we have no real archaeological record of any sort of Hanging Garden site.
In Babylon, but
In
we
Babylon.
do have it in Samaria
In
Su-
Assyria.
Assyria,
Yeah.
Assyria. Great. So the game sort of has this plateaued garden. Is that what it would have looked like?
That's what we suspect. If it was real, it would have looked like this. But again, we don't have any archaeological evidence, so it's a bit tough to say.
So despite it not sort of maybe existing, is there more you can tell us about the Hanging Gardens?
Sure. Well, if it did exist, what they suspect was that it had a water wheel system that brought water up to the top and then it flowed down the terraces, making it have nice waterfalls, nice gardens, nice terraces. And according to legend, it was built by the king Nebuchadnezzar II in order to please his wife, who was from the kingdom of Media.
Happy wife, happy life,
Happy
right?
wife, happy life. She is from a much greener area, a much more lush area with mountains. And so he wanted to make her happy and built these gardens.
Now this is a total myth, isn't it?
Yeah, it's probably a myth. But we do have images of the Assyrian kings and his queen lounging in gardens, lounging with lots of people fanning them with palm leaves and things. They also have a tree with the severed heads of kings, of conquered kings in the same garden. So
Why?
that's Assyrian style for you.
Okay. Now here I'm getting suzerainty of Geneva. Hopefully they can help me with this war. Although I'm not really investing in this war. I don't really care about my units. I am not making peace yet because I was thinking maybe I can get the archery boost with my slinger. So I'm chasing them down. And for the hero, I decided to get Maui. Now, I really regret this decision. I think it was the worst decision I made in this entire game because you only get one hero. And Maui was maybe not the right choice. Maybe I would have gone for Himiko, get more city-states on my side. And that's because Maui on floodplain tiles is actually not that useful.
Oh, what's wrong with him?
You get some luxuries, but you also get a lot of
Wheat, I guess.
wheat, yeah, chance for rice and
Yeah.
corn. And I really don't need rice and corn. And, you know, you can only use Maui once because by the time you can get enough faith to recall him, you've already gotten all the tiles into your city. So at least, you know, here Maui gave me sugar luxury, which is, you know, more luxuries is always good. You don't really have a luxury problem, I think, in a one city challenge, because again, one city, you don't need too much luxury. So yeah, I think this was a huge mistake. But anyways,
So we're trying to make peace now?
yes, we definitely want to make peace. We see a lot of advanced units being made by Hungary. He will not take peace, so we're just gonna wait it out. And I think the best government choice here for a one city challenge is going to be autocracy because it really concentrates yields into your capital with the +1 to all yields in each government plaza building, diplomatic quarter building, and palace. So we're going to get all of those. So I think autocratic legacy is going to be a good card to have in the future. And, you know, it has a nice balance of different cards.
And autocracy does work with Babylon, which really was an autocracy for. I mean, it is a city-state that has sort of divine rulers. They have rulers who are sanctioned with Marduk and from the gods. So it really is very much that kind of autocratic rule.
And for my building in my government plaza, I'm going for audience chamber. Now, is that related in any way?
For sure. Babylon was designed, especially during the Neo-Babylonian period, to have these grand vistas for processions, for impressing foreign dignitaries. So I think audience chamber really works very well here.
Right. And we finally get our piece. So I think we're going to end the episode here, but definitely lots more to talk about with Babylon. Even though they're an earlier civ, we've covered a lot of their unique abilities. I think you've got a lot more to say, right?
Definitely. I'll put that Mesopotamian ceramics class to good use.
Yeah. So make sure you subscribe and like this video. We are just 100 subscribers away from monetizing, which means we'll get like a few pennies.
I'm excited for those pennies.
Yeah. Help us get our pennies and subscribe to our channel. See you in the next one.
See you next time.